Rangers Football Club has been blessed with some wonderful strikers throughout the years. The predatory finishing of Ali McCoist, the unquestionable ability of Bob McPhail, Chris Boyd's instinctive approach in the 18-yard box. One of the best, though, has always remained in the shadows. Two-footed and good with his head. A clinical finisher. To this day, still a goal-scoring record holder at Ibrox. For Sam English, the finest season of his Rangers career was also the worst. On the 18th of August 1908, Samuel English was born near Garva in Northern Ireland. His family owned this small holding at Crivolee. Now a disused outbuilding, this was where the young Sam spent the formative years of his life.
So my father was a farmer, and the ground came up for sale here, and my father bought the place in. Obviously he probably knew about the story too. My father was a great football fan too, as myself, you know, and he was always a Rangers supporter too, so it maybe had a wee bearing in it, but the agriculture ground was what he was after at the time. It's just an outbuilding for storage now, you know, and that's basically it. But we still try and, you know, it has to be whitewashed, do the old traditional way, so I do that way. And there was an old thatched roof on it, I think, time Sam was there. So obviously there's been a few changes since Sam left, we put a different roof on, etc. But, you know, I would try and keep it in place. We've had people back on the premises, and I think it was relations of Sam's coming back to see the place and all. So, you know, it has a lot of history to it.
In 1924, the English family moved to Scotland, settling down in Dalmuir on the banks of the River Clyde. Sam became employed at John Brown's shipyard in Clydebank. Playing for the Works team, his talent was soon spotted, and he was signed up by local junior side Yoker Athletic. 86-year-old Athletic fan Des Kyle began going to Home Park in the 1920s. He vividly remembers the impact a young Sam English made on the supporters there.
At that time, all junior clubs carry big support. If you get 12,000 in a small ground like this, there's not much room for anybody. It's like you get a Hampden with 146,000 or something like that, you know. It's the same idea, you know. No seating, it's just all standing, and you're crushed together. Sam is a player. He was not a very tall player, but he wasn't small. He was maybe about 5'10", 5'11", or something like that, you know. And he was well built, good shoulders on him, and good neck muscles. He could head a ball, you know, and he had two good feet.
When he played here, when he was scoring all these goals, did he look like a player who was destined for greater things?
Oh yes, he looked head and shoulders above the majority of players that he played against and with, you know. He was stood out from a goal scoring point of view, you know, and his knowledge of the game. He's a very intelligent player. He could score them from a few angles. I mean, any opportunity that Sam got, they were in the net, you know, and defences couldn't take their eye off him.
Sam English's goal-scoring habit not only drew huge crowds to Home Park, scouts from senior clubs were circling as well. An average of 100 goals a season at Yoker meant he was soon attracting the attention of bigger and better clubs. It was Rangers who signed him. He moved in the summer of 1931.
He was outstanding junior, and in them days, and intermediate days, and anybody is outstanding in that grade of football was bound to make it, you know. There were a lot of players made in them days, but Sam was outstanding with Yoker. So nobody was surprised he made it at Rangers.
A lot of players came to the junior ranks. Sometimes the players got put out there for a year to mature and toughen up, because junior football was very, very tough, and it was of a reasonably high standard in these days. So it was not unusual. Quite a lot of players were put out to the junior teams, Willie Waddle, Billy Thornton, and came back in and more or less went straight into the first team.
It wasn't that unusual to get players from junior sides. To get players to come in and make such an impact in such a short time would probably be unusual. bearing in mind that Sam English was only 23 when he came into the Rangers side, and made this immediate impact with goals galore, basically.
It was the juniors was really the only main source of getting players. I mean, there was great players of that same era, like Alec James, who came from Ashfield and went to Raith Rovers, and Hughie Gallagher and so forth. They all went through the junior grade. It's not like nowadays where they can pick boys up from school and there's boys clubs and so forth. Junior grade now is a bit of a regression. It's older players stepping back, but at that time promising players were coming through, and Rangers up to the 1950s and 60s had some really good signings.
Well, if you consider the Old Firm games at that time were attracting between 80 and 100,000 people, and to come from a relative modest background of Clydebank and Yoker into this vast arena, and as I say, as a young guy to have this huge impact, it's certainly a life-changing thing for him at that time when he joined the club.
The leap to Rangers did not faze Sam English. His competitive debut came at Ibrox in a league match against Dundee. He scored twice in a 4-1 win. Just over a week later, Morton were next to experience the full force of Sam's goal-scoring abilities. The young Irishman hit the back of the net 5 times in a 7-3 win, only his second match for the club. That set the ball rolling in what was to become an incredible season of goal-scoring. Not the tallest of strikers, Sam English certainly made the most of his God-given talents.
Well, there aren't many people around who saw Sam English as a player, and certainly as a player with Rangers, so we've got to really rely on accounts of the time. But it does seem to have been a kind of bustling type of striker, young enthusiastic guy, natural goal scorer as well, and in that regard, probably in the modern day, you would say Chris Boyd is very similar in that context. He scores a lot of goals from nothing, effectively.
I think by all accounts from what I've read, Sam English was a complete striker. From early newspaper reports, he seems to have been 2-footed, pacey, and although he wasn't particularly tall, he was about 5'8", 5'9", he was good in the air. His first game for Rangers, he scored twice, and both headers, and I think if the events of 5th of September 1931 hadn't have happened, he'd have gone on to legendary status. He was a phenomenal goal scorer. First season coming up from junior football to score 44 goals. It's a tremendous feat.
Well, according to the records, his attribute was that he was an opportunist, and he was capable of scoring goals in the box, and he was what would they call now a real target man.
In 1963, Sam's life story was serialised in the Scottish Daily Express. It was the first time he had spoken publicly about his career, a revealing account of one man's life.
I was fit and fast, as quick over a 20-yard burst as Tory Gillick, I like to think, but mainly I scored goals, which after all is what football is all about. In 3 years with Yoker Athletic, I averaged 100 goals a season. My shot was never big, it was just that I could place the ball where I wanted it, or near about. That was what I did best.
On the 2nd of September 1931, Rangers beat Falkirk 2-1. Sam English scored on the day, taking his league tally already to 12. 3 days later, Celtic travelled to Ibrox for the season's first Old Firm clash. It was to be a match which effectively ended the careers of 2 of Scottish football's brightest prospects. In goal for Celtic was John Thompson. Aged only 22, he was already a Scotland cap. Agile and fearless, he was one of the finest goalkeepers in the country. Just before half-time, Sam English latched onto a through ball from Jimmy Fleming. As he went to shoot, John Thompson dived at his feet. English's knee collided with Thompson's head.
The ball comes to me from the side. I can see John Thompson moving out of his goal. He hesitates about the 6-yard line to balance himself. By now I have pulled the ball round in line with my right foot. I kick it, again with my right, cutting across the front of the ball to try to swerve it in. John Thompson is on me in a rugby tackle. His head thumps into the inside of my left knee. I feel nothing. I fall over him. The ball trickles over the byline, barely rolling. A sudden heavy silence filled Ibrox.
There was a general recognition there was something major had happened amongst the players. The crowds on both sides were making a lot of noise, the Celtic fans, because an apparent certain goal was averted. Rangers fans because they saw the Celtic goalkeeper lying in the turf. But David Meiklejohn, who was the Rangers captain that day, went over to the Rangers fans to quieten them, because he recognised there was something serious here, and Thompson was then carried from the pitch and taken to hospital and died later on that evening.
John Thompson was in many ways a Celtic legend, a young goalkeeper, played for Scotland in that. And it was a tragic accident. I've seen photographs where he's just going through and the goalkeeper comes out, but that would have had a major effect on him, and a major effect on any player that is involved in a situation like that.
Thompson was renowned for his bravery and diving at the feet of advancing forwards, and in fact just 18 months earlier he had been involved in a similar incident where he ended up I think damaging some ribs, and I think he had another fracture. So he was that type of keeper, and of course Sam English, being the bustling type of forward he was, and enthusiastic and with a big crowd, it'd be inevitable that they would come into contact through the match.
A fatal accident inquiry into the tragic death cleared Sam English of any blame. Despite the verdict, the comments of then Celtic manager Willie Maley didn't help Sam's plight.
The coroner's inquest decided it was a death caused by accident. And John Thompson's family, they cleared Sam English of any blame. The only kind of fly in the ointment was the Celtic manager at the time, Willie Maley. He questioned whether it was an accident, and that statement he made was probably contributed to the hard life that Sam English had to lead after that, because no doubt there was a lot of people maybe thought there's something in what Willie Maley said, and Sam English would suffer for the rest of his playing career through it.
Basic gist of what he said was that he would like to think it was an accident, which was a despicable thing really to say, because it did immediately cast doubt on whether there was any intent from Sam English. Now, anyone who's looked at the footage and saw it, and even the family of John Thompson recognised that there was no blame apportioned to Sam English in any way. But that's something that stuck around it for a long time, and that probably increased the problems that Sam English had thereafter.
His career after he left never reached the same heights. I'm no doubt it must have had a big effect on him in being involved in the accident, and in many ways 2 careers were blighted because of that.
In the weeks following the tragedy, Sam was eventually eased back into the Rangers team. On the 3rd of October, he returned to goal-scoring ways, hitting a double in a 6-1 win over Cowdenbeath. Throughout the season, the goals kept on coming, although it wasn't enough to take Rangers to the title. Motherwell ended the 31-32 season as champions, with Rangers second. Bill Struth's side did win the Scottish Cup, beating Kilmarnock 3-0 in the final. By the end of the campaign, Sam English had scored 53 goals. His 44 league goals in just 35 games set a new record. A record that's never been beaten to this day. A record which may never be beaten.
When you consider he was a young guy coming into the team with a lot of established international players on the side, and to score in fact 53 goals that season, 44 of which were in the league, and just by virtue of the fact it's a record which has never been touched, shows the whole significance of it.
When you think the amount of strikers we've got and had at the club, Jim Forrest had a fantastic run when he played, and Ali McCoist, and they've never managed to beat that.
It's a phenomenal achievement, it really is, in any era, in any time at a football club, to score that amount of goals, it's incredible. 44 league goals and 53 in one season. It's a tremendous achievement, and obviously I never saw him play, but he must have been some goal scorer, I'll tell you that.
When you look back at some of the great centre forwards we've had with Rangers, Thornton, Ali McCoist, if you go look back, it's absolutely remarkable.
If you go back to the 1920s and 30s, nearly all centre forwards are scoring on average maybe about 40 or 50 goals a season. It's quite a lot of high scoring. And Sam English had a great pedigree as a junior. He'd scored 197 goals in 2 years with Yoker. So I think Rangers really got a good one when they got him.
Despite a record-breaking season, the career of Sam English was on the wane. He would last only one more season at Rangers before moving south to Liverpool. Despite scoring 27 goals in 50 games, he was clearly affected by his part in the John Thompson tragedy.
In many regards, Sam English died that day as well, I would say. Certainly his career firstly died that day, although he went on to score a lot of goals that year and also helped Rangers to win the Scottish Cup. But to a great extent, I think Sam English's career died in that turf as well.
Finished him as a player. He went down to England, but he never recovered from it. It was a shame that an incident did happen, because it destroyed not only John Thompson, but more or less destroyed Sam English as well.
A few weeks later they had to go and play Celtic in the Glasgow Cup at Celtic Park, and it seems in that game a lot of Celtic players were going for Sam English, and if my memory serves me right, I'm sure he'd broken his wrist in that match. It got to the extent that no matter where Rangers were playing, chants were coming from the terrace and murderer and so forth, and this obviously affected Sam English's game. And it makes it all the more remarkable that he did score 44 goals in his one season, in that one season, because who knows what he'd have done if he hadn't been under the sufferance he had from the crowds at the time.
No matter where he went, the crowds always seemed to relate to that particular incident and think it was getting to him, even though the players who were there that day, particularly Bob McPhail in his life story, said it was a pure accident, and he actually had a great sympathy for Sam English.
No doubt it must have had a huge effect on him, and I think that would be one of the reasons why he left the club.
In Scotland, at cornered kicks, the crowd shrieked, "What's the keeper? What's the killer?" If I ever clashed with a player opponents would run alongside and whisper, "That'll be another man you've killed." In England they said bluntly, "Watch that murderer." Manager Struth of Rangers advised me to play with cotton wool in my ears. I declined. Cotton wool would have solved nothing. When there was a daring keeper against me, that was the end of the game, so far as I was concerned. Often I must have looked like a non-trier.
100 years on from the birth of Sam English, a group of Rangers supporters decided to mark the occasion. In his hometown of Garva, the official Sam English Centenary campaign was launched.
When it was brought to our attention that this year's the centenary of his birth, we thought that great portions of Sam's story haven't been told. Obviously the tragedy with John Thompson has tended to overshadow his career, and even members of his family have said, well, sadly, that tragedy did mean that his career didn't develop the way it could have done or it should have done, and we want to tell the whole story.
It's very important to the borough of Coleraine to have someone of the stature of Sam English recognised, and although Sam's a Coleraine man of such, not an awful lot is known of Sam English owing to the shortness of his career. This is a tremendous boost for our borough.
What I was told by Mr. Struth when he sent me was, if you give us as good service as your countryman Sam English give us, you'll do for us. Now that was the words he told us. So when I said that, he must have been some player.
The fact is that his life didn't finish with John Thompson's tragedy. He did have a glittering career. He scored for Liverpool. Obviously he still holds a record for Rangers, but also he didn't give up on football. It's sometimes been said that he gave up football aged 28. Well, in fact, he went on to coach, he went on to manage, obviously not quite as high a level as he would have liked, but he also, to the end of his days, attended Ibrox, attended Firhill, picked and chose what games to go to. He would be out most Saturdays watching football, so football was a thread that ran through his entire life.
At the local supporters club, members are proud to finally have one of their own recognised.
Sam English was born and spent 2 years of his life 3 miles down the road. Didn't spend a lot of his life there until he moved to Glasgow, but I'm personally proud to be a member of this club, and I'm proud that our club's involved.
Sam was remembered as a great goal scorer for Rangers, an All-Ireland international, something we're very proud of. For a man from this area to hold the goal scoring record at Ibrox for 75 years, we think it's amazing for such a small area, and we're very proud of that fact.
When you consider some of the good goal scorers we have had over the years, McCoist, Bob McPhail even, to name only a couple, it's amazing that that record has still stood for so long, you know.
In Belfast, the memory of Sam English is being kept alive. This mural, a tribute to every Northern Irishman to have played for Rangers, stands proud, just around the corner from the former home of George Best, another local legend. A unique trophy has been created at the request of the Rangers support, one which will celebrate the life of Sam English. Irish silversmith Cara Murphy was given the task.
I was fascinated when I started to look into the history of Sam English and what he had achieved at his time in Rangers, and I liked the idea that the piece would represent not just as a sort of generic award, but that every goal was represented. The bowl itself is, as I say, it has started off as a 36 centimetre disc of silver that has been hammered up. Inside the bowl will be 44 silver balls. Each one has been made out of 2 halves and pressed. So these still have to be cut, soldered together and polished. As the years progress, the piece will progress, because as every year a ball will be engraved with the winner's name of the highest goal scoring name. I am a perfectionist at heart, so I always like to make sure that everything that I produce is the best that I can, and I like the idea that the piece has been handcrafted, but that every hammer mark is an individual mark, and I like to make sure that it is even and it's, you know, going to work the way I want it to. And I think that always the nice thing is to see, you know, once the piece is finished and once that you start to see the players and the club and the supporters start to enjoy the piece, that's always a very rewarding side of things, for you're standing back more and letting them take ownership on it.
A first appearance at Ibrox. The finished trophy will be proudly displayed here at the stadium from this day forward.
The piece has really come together exactly as I had anticipated. Now with it all polished from when you saw it earlier, the reflections that have now happened in the bowl have increased the sensitivity of the bowl. I think it'll be fantastic when it's actually on view in the Rangers trophy room, because it's a fantastic achievement for a player, and nobody has ever come close to that number of goals in a season.
Sam English returned home to Dalmuir after spells at Liverpool, Queen of the South and Hartlepool United. He retired as a player at the age of just 28. He never gave up on football though. He spent many happy years at Glenhead Park, passing on his knowledge of the game as a coach at local club Duntoker Hibs. Many years after the tragedy of the John Thompson incident at Ibrox, Sam English met with the goalkeeper's brother Jim. It was a meeting he had waited for all his life.
As the shadows of late afternoon slowly filled into the room, Jim said quietly, "I never blamed you for what happened, Sam. Neither did my mother. Even when she was at her lowest, she always spared a thought for you. I'm sorry you've been so troubled." It was as if he had given me the gift of a new life. Here was peace.
Sam English died in 1967 after battling motor neurone disease. He was aged just 58. With 44 league goals in his first season as a Rangers player, Sam English set new standards. In his first season out of the junior ranks, the Irishman set a goal-scoring record that may never be beaten.
You've got to look at that first year and the impact he had at that time, and there would be no reason not to expect him to continue that. Every other striker that's had a prolific season of goal scoring goes on to replicate that over and over again, and you've got to expect that Sam English would have done the same.
If you go with the record, because he holds a record, then he's up there. Obviously, you would like to look at over an extended period, and that's why if you take somebody like Ali McCoist, Bob McPhail, when you see what they've done over say 10, 12 years has been tremendous.
I think he's probably Rangers' greatest ever. You know, I mean, to score so many goals in one season, you know, when you think of it, you're coming in, you're playing with new teammates, you've got to adjust to their style of play, and who knows, maybe in 5 or 6 seasons he might have possibly passed Jimmy McGrory's record. It's quite possible. You know, he had it in him, I would say.
The career of Sam English effectively finished on the 5th of September 1931. Had it not been for the John Thompson tragedy, who knows how good he might have become.